on this particular podcast, we're spending a lot of time sharing the experience, strength, and hope of others who have faced, real obstacles in their life. And today I am joined by none other than Mike Conroy. Mike is the Director of Recovery Services for Archway House. It's a professional sober living and executives men's home that specializes in helping professionals and executives integrate recovery into their active and busy lives. We started about 3 years ago. Mike was on the founding end of our journey together, and welcome to Overcome Out Loud, Mike.
I'm so grateful to be here, Charlie. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming. I like to say Mike has, in recovery, it's really a difficult task, and Mike, I think, has the hardest job of what we do, because he's got to support, encourage, and hold people accountable, and find a way to influence what might be some of their old behaviors and get those to change to be consistent with what people in recovery do, and then support them and connect with them. And I've always admired his own growth, and so it'll be great to sit down and get into your own story. And in doing that, we always start kind of with an origin story. So you're a local California guy. You grew up here locally. Tell us a little bit about the early years for Mike Conroy and some of the things you faced, Mike.
Well, I was actually born in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was the fifth child of a Midwestern Minnesota family. 5 kids is just a average family. When we moved out here, it was a big family, but in the Midwest, it was an average family. And so my dad felt that in Phoenix, there wasn't a job that would support 5 kids. So he started looking for jobs in Los Angeles. And so he moved to Los Angeles, and my parents were actually not really like technically separated, but living in different cities for the first part of my life, which I don't remember, but it was a rough entry. I don't remember a lot of peace. We lived in Park La Brea in Los Angeles, and I don't remember that, but I grew up in Westlake Village, and we moved in when I was 2. And I remember the move-in. I remember running around the house. I remember the red shag carpet that was popular back in those days. And I remember there were kids in every house. It was it was 1969, and there were a lot of kids in the neighborhood, and there was just a lot. I was the youngest of 5 kids, and I was just always on the run because everybody was bigger than me, and it seemed like everybody was out to get me, and I never really felt safe. But I didn't feel safe.
Interesting. So as the youngest, and we often talk about the lens that we see the world from. Can you identify where that feeling of not being safe came from at such a young age?
Yeah, I can. It was just that there was this you could call it a sibling rivalry with my next oldest sibling, who was 7 years older than me. There were 4 kids born in the 50s, boom, boom, boom. And then I came along in 67, and everybody was quite a bit older. I felt separated at first, always. My next oldest sister I think she was just jealous of me. We've been through it. We get along great today, but she was very jealous of me. And there was a lot of physical violence. There was a lot of anger. Both my mom and my dad were angry. They fought with each other. The marriage was a little bit rocky in my early childhood, which I think made me feel unsafe. I was always in trouble. And I felt like when my parents would fight, I felt like it was my fault, that if I wasn't such a bad kid, that they wouldn't be fighting. And there was a significant amount of violence, but I always feel I feel funny talking about this being so affecting my life, because I've heard so many stories of people like yourself that grew up in real incredible violence. And I grew up in Westlake Village in a family that was, kind of rough and tumble, and it scarred me. And my story's really not that bad. I don't feel like my story really sounds that bad, but it really did affect me. I really grew up feeling like my heart was broken all the time, and just working on that broken heart has been kind of my life's journey.
It's interesting because we had one of my favorite guests on Overcome Out Loud was Joel Relampagos, and Joel talks about the relative nature of trauma, because when he went first to see his therapist, he talked about, the therapist, asked him about trauma. He's like, well, I didn't witness any accidents, and I didn't see any real death, and, I don't think I had any real trauma. And until he was able to reframe what trauma actually means. And it's important that we frame trauma, because trauma is relative and trauma is our experience. And so Joel had a mother who was suffering from significant depression, and so her ability to connect and love him was separated from what a normal kind of child would expect from a mother. And so what he heard was, you're not good enough, you're not lovable. It wasn't that, he experienced this kind of violent trauma or even extensive trauma that some people think of trauma, but for him, that trauma lens was very clear and it separated him from himself. And it sounds like that's a little what happened to you. And I think it's important for our listeners not to compare. As I've shared my story, and we've had so many stories on, and we've had Erica Sandrazura on, who had a charming upbringing, really very sensitive, very loving parents. I think she joked about her mom drinking non-alcoholic white Zinfandel and feeling buzzed, and that was the extent of her childhood experience. But her induction into drugs was different for different reasons. So it's important we don't compare, and that the lens that you saw was the lens that you experienced, which was, for you, impactful, and it separated you from you, and you started to hear things through a lens of, I'm not good enough, I'm not safe, I'm not lovable, and that actually resulted in a bunch of coping skills for you. And so what were those coping skills? I mean, how did you at a young age, I like to say we do things in pattern because we get a payoff from them. What were the early coping skills and the ways that you dealt with that, both healthy and unhealthy?
Well, I was alone a lot. My parents put me in nursery school, which I guess it would be called daycare today, when I was 2. And I was there from 7:30 in the morning till 5 every day. And I was only 2. So I felt tremendous separation. I remember crying and asking my mom not to leave me there, but she wanted to go to nursing school. Plus, my sister, one of my other sisters, I have 3 sisters, and one of my sisters was in the hospital, and she was actually dying of Crohn's disease. And the doctors told my parents that, you've got this wild kid, and she needs quiet, and she needs to heal and recover, and so you got to get him out of the house. I don't think they really thought about it. I think they were probably proud of themselves that they could afford daycare, and that it was a good, reputable place. Put the kid in daycare, problem solved. But I had huge issues of abandonment. I was hit with a wooden spoon in that place. I was told I was a bad kid. I was there hours before anybody got there. I was there hours after everybody left with nothing to do, and just, not really liked by the teachers. And when my mom would pick me up, the teacher would just dress her down and tell her what a bad kid I was. I was the worst kid in the class, and blah, blah, blah. My coping skills were that I just would run. And I played sports. I was fast, and I was a good athlete. And I did a lot of really dangerous things just to get that kind of that high. I did things to impress other kids, but I would do really crazy, stupid stuff even when nobody was around, just because it made me feel out of myself. And I ate a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
I ate a lot of sugar.
So what were some of those crazy things? I mean,
like one time I was 2 years old, and my brother and my dad had left a stepladder in the garage. And so I climbed up the ladder. I was 2. I climbed up the ladder, and I got my hands around the rafters in the ladder in the garage. And then my feet came away from the ladder, and I couldn't get my feet back on the ladder. So I just thought I could drop myself down, a 2-year-old, from the rafters in the garage. And I fell kind of like sideways. I didn't get my feet underneath me, and I hit my head on the cement really hard as a 2-year-old. And I'm sure I had a major concussion. It hurt really bad. And I'm pretty sure I probably damaged something. And then I played football and got multiple concussions. I've been thinking about all the head trauma that's in the news, and I've had head trauma since I can remember from doing stuff like that. I did really dangerous stuff. I was kind of a little bit of a pyro. I loved lighting stuff on fire. I never burned anything down or put any fires that I couldn't put out, but there was lighter fluid from the camping gear in the garage, and I'd go in there and get that, and I'd light something on fire and then stamp it out and pray to God that my dad didn't see the smoke, because I would have been in big trouble. But I was always doing stuff that I knew was risky. Like I would sneak out of bed in the middle of the night to go down and eat Oreos. And if I got caught out of bed, it was a big deal. I would have been in really big trouble.
Yeah, so a lot of risk taking, and interesting that you experienced the language of teachers, and I don't think teachers understand, especially when you've got a kid who's impacted with trauma, the reinforcing messages that they can send. What maybe just a normal kid with disciplinary problems, or a normal kid with learning problems, or a normal kid who they've got to teach. But when you come from a trauma impacted brain, those messages, the reinforcing messages that you were getting with the wooden spoon and the Mike's the worst student in the class, and I like to say these records, they get stacked on top of each other, and you were hearing, you were continuing to hear some pretty unhealthy things about yourself, and at a young age, I like to say there's a book called The Secret to the Slight Edge that was written by Bob Moad and T.J. Hosington, and they say in that book that champions are born and then unmade. That our brains as young kids are really innocent and really full of hope and aspirations, and through these experiences we begin to lay down these blueprints of a life that is through the lens of other people's experiences, and I hear that a lot in your story of this lens that you had. And some healthy kids would be able to, with healthy parents, would be able to kind of shield off of those, but for you, it sounds like you just continue to buy in and believe those narratives.
Yeah, and I got in a lot of fights. I got in fights with kids bigger than me. I got suspended from school in the first grade for fighting. And then as a punishment, or as like a probationary thing, I had to stay after class and get a note from the teacher that was basically a progress report on my behavior for that whole day. I had to get that every day, every single day for the rest of my first grade year and my entire second grade year. So staying late and getting those notes would not give me enough time to get home. They would try to let the little kids, the first through third grade, they would get them time to go out and get home. Then they'd let the fourth, fifth graders out for their afternoon break because they had to stay in school longer. So the teacher would basically make me stay late and not, no sense of urgency. So when I would get this note, then I'd have to walk home, and I'd have to walk home through all the fourth, fifth graders who knew I was coming because it was every day and they were looking for me. And I had to kind of like fight my way home. So it's like I get kicked out of school for fighting, and then I got to fight my way home because they're keeping me home from school. And a lot of mixed messages, and a lot of like withholding, a lot of messages that, I don't count. It doesn't matter. You get in trouble for something that your my mom and dad, my brother and sisters were all modeling anger, modeling violence. And then I was acting out, and then I was a bad kid. And it just seemed like bad stuff just rolled downhill, and I was at the bottom of the hill when I got all of it. And I just felt like it didn't matter. I didn't count. And I would get more and more angry and more risky. And I was headed down a bad path. I was headed towards, I could see that there were kids in the school that I went to that they were kind of separating out as the kids that just were incorrigible. There's nothing you could do with them. And they would separate them out from the other kids who were kind of like in the normal class. And I could see that they were separating me into that.
Even at that age, you could feel that separation?
Feel it. Oh, yeah. I knew it. And so I threw myself into my schoolwork, and I thought I was dumb. I'd been told that I, couldn't make it. And I figured out that if I just paid attention and focused on what was in front of me, that I could do good work. And so that started to turn around, where I started to get approval from teachers, coaches, parents for getting good grades. I continued to, be a good athlete and got approval for that. So that was another kind of like an addiction. I would say my first addiction was sugar. My second addiction was anger. And my third addiction was, approval from excelling in school.
Interesting. And as you were excelling and improving, one of the things that I never was able to internalize was those affirmations or those acknowledgments from external sources. I still never felt like I measured up despite whatever success I was having, because it wasn't intentional. Were you able to take in did you feel congruent with those affirmations you were getting from coaches? Did you feel that was a representation of you, or did you still feel that there was this false self inside that didn't deserve even some of the accolades you were getting?
That's a really good question, because no. I mean, I would work really hard on, I went all the way to calculus in math in high school. I was in honors English. I was in advanced science, advanced Spanish. I took every advanced class that I could get, because I would work really hard on a paper, and I would stay up all night, or I would work on it really hard, and I would turn this paper in, and I'd get the paper back, and there'd be a big A on that paper. And there was a moment of, yay, I'm good. I did good. My parents are going to like this. My teachers are happy. Everybody's happy, but I'm only happy for about 9 seconds. And then I'm back to, I feel this broken heart. I didn't have that conscious thought. It wasn't like I was conscious of having this broken, but I definitely felt something in my stomach, like something's just wrong. And the relief that I got from getting good grades was diminishing returns. So I would do well on a math, I would get good grade on an English paper. I would, get a bio lab and get an A. And I was just working harder and harder and harder and harder for diminishing less and less and less relief. And it began to just not be worth it anymore. And I came back to just this empty feeling of not being good enough and not counting for anything. Really, really low self-esteem, tragic.
Yeah, and that's that narrative that gets reinforced. I think in Maxwell Maltz's book, Psycho-Cybernetics, he talks about the fact that we will behave and achieve in accordance with the person we believe ourselves to be, and that we can't outperform our self-image. And so as this self-image, this narrative around not good enough was being developed and reinforced, that the achievements were not satisfying. And that's, I think, one of the traps that a lot of people fall into is this kind of destination disease that our friend Mike Diamond talks about, where, the feeling is that I'll be okay when I achieve, when I get the A, when I get the new car, when I get the right job, when I get the right career, then I'll be okay. And it really doesn't work that way. I mean, really the satisfaction has to come from enjoying the process and from our own self-image and from our own self-worth, but we're really not taught how to develop that internal advertising campaign. And so we listen to, the narrative of others, and you continued to chase that. And so when did drugs and alcohol become, the next way of coping?
Well, that's an interesting story, because I was in so much trouble growing up, and I'd gotten just so busted in my early years. And then I started to get good grades, and then I started to get the dean's list, and then I was getting straight A's. And, I was like this kind of prodigy in my family. No one had ever done that. And I was really on the straight and narrow. I was hanging out with the right kids. I wasn't being separated in with the bad kids. I was hanging out with the good kids, the popular kids. What was the question? I lost my train of thought.
When did drinking and drugs become the next bastion of relief for you?
Yeah, I can see why I lost my train of thought. I was on such a good track, and I felt like, there was that song in the 80s, and my future was so bright, I got to wear shades. And I just felt like everything was so on track, and I had a really good feeling. That feeling was good, I felt like I had a future. I'm doing the right things. I'm getting good grades. Everything is going well, and drugs are bad. Nobody did. I knew guys that did drugs. I knew guys that had smoked pot and would drink beer and stuff like that. And they were kind of crazy. And I played football, and I knew some crazy kids, and I knew that they drank beer. But when I was a freshman in high school, something happened between my 8th grade year and my freshman year of high school. In that summer, when I hit puberty, there was some kind of a hormonal chemical rush, some kind of a change happened, where I lost that feeling of good. And it just, I had these emotional outbursts. I couldn't regulate myself emotionally. And I began to feel the social pressures of high school that I'd never felt before. And I was absolutely desperate to be accepted. And the football players went to this field. We actually went to Westlake High School, was under construction back then. And we were drinking on their football field, which was under construction. It wasn't completed. It was kind of a dirt field. And I remember there was this joint coming around. There was beer, and I was, kind of panicking, because I'm not one of those kids. I'm a good kid. It's really important for me to be a good kid, because I'm not a bad kid anymore. I'm a good kid. And if you do drugs, you're a bad kid. But when that joint came around, I took a hit and I passed it on, and lightning didn't strike. Nothing bad happened. I didn't immediately turn into some kind of like a separated off with the kid losers. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I felt relief. And I felt that kind of relief that I had been searching for in sugar and good grades and all of a sudden it was like, wow, that was crazy. I'll never do that again. But that sure was fun. And then by the next Friday night, I was already talking to everybody, like, where's the party? Where are we going to meet? How are we going to get some of that? I was completely addicted from my first drink, from my first hit.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'm so glad that you share about that, because I think a lot of people think that, that can't happen, and we've listened to many stories of people who, from their first hit, their first line, their first toke, became addicted to that relief that they got. And I think, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because we really do have these two dials of beliefs and behaviors, and we do, given how strong the foundation of Not Good Enough was, I know, and I think we're going to see this pattern of you building up this great life. This, here you were, one of the good kids, doing well in school, and because you still had this internal dialogue that had really been reinforced, you didn't have really any defense against grabbing that joint, because you really were going to level back down to Mike's bad, and that was really at the core the belief that you had. And I think it's important people understand that as long as we, I say whatever we don't deal with is ultimately going to deal with us, that if we don't really change the nature of our internal dialogue, that we are going to continue like a thermostat set at 55. We may exceed it for a little while. So you did well in school, you were doing well, but at some point, you didn't have enough affirming, real deep foundational belief that you were good. And so when bad behavior struck, you leveled right back down.
That was all on the outside.
Yeah.
None of it was coming in. It didn't really get into the inside of me. I just felt really good on the outside. And when that wore off, which was, moments, then I'm right back to just, feeling like, well, if I want to feel good again, I got to do something great. I got to score a touchdown or get an A.
And you were always chasing.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah.
And so where did that lead you? Because I know you had you developed a bit of a skill in school and started to pursue law. And so, you obviously graduated and finished playing sports in high school. So the next progression was to achieve some more. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had kind of been sold a bill of goods, like a lot of in the 80s when I was going to high school. The narrative was, you go to college and you'll be okay. If you can, the best determiner of success is school. If you if you don't get pregnant before 18 and you get a college degree, you have like the best chance of being successful or something like that. So I thought, okay, well, I can do those two things. And
you could do the not getting pregnant.
I could definitely not get pregnant. I knew I could do that.
Aces.
But, that was I wasn't sure of anything, but I did go to school. I went to college, and college was that was where my drinking and smoking marijuana really took off. And I just had this narrative in my head that all I have to do is just graduate, get the degree, and it'll take care of itself. But when I got out of college and I had to grow up and be, in the real world and get a real job and pay real bills and, grow up and participate in life, build some kind of life. But I wasn't motivated. I felt terrible. I just felt like, what's the point? I would get a job, and I was excited about the job, and I interviewed really well. I could make a great first impression, but I didn't feel good. So I was smoking marijuana all the time. It was affecting my job. Even if I wasn't smoking marijuana, though, I just didn't feel like, what is the point of this job? I almost felt like it was a prison sentence. Like, all I'm doing is just trading time for money. I get a piece of paper with some numbers on it that's a check, and I just transfer that to another piece of paper, which is a bill. And in the meantime, what's left for me? What am I doing? There's no fulfillment at all. And I just wasn't motivated. So I'd get fired, and then I'd go out and get another job because I was in desperation mode. And I just stayed in this depression. And so I knew that I was good in school. That was one skill that I had kind of perfected. The work thing, I kind of didn't figure that out. But I went back to law school. I figured, well, I'm good at school. I'll go to law school. So I went to law school, and I thought I was going to get serious about that. But the partying, the drinking, and the smoking just got even worse in law school. I don't know how I made it through law school, especially since I've got really bad ADD, and I'm not a very good reader. I can only really read when I'm hyper-focusing under test conditions. And in law school, there's a tremendous amount of reading, and it's very boring. It's very dry. There's no pictures in law books. It's all text. It's all reading, and it's very, very dry. And I tried to study. I tried to keep up. I couldn't do it. I would just get depressed and smoke marijuana. And I would just talk to people, what'd you think about that case? What's this, if it's civil procedure, I'd be like, what'd you think about that case on promissory estoppel or something, and they'd be like talking. I would try to pick up words that meant nothing to me and try to put those words into the exam. And somehow I was on academic probation the whole way through law school. I was on academic probation until my last semester when I got off of academic probation and graduated. And then I tried to pass the bar, but by that time, taking all of law school and dumping it into one test was just beyond my capabilities. I wasn't motivated. I didn't care.
It's interesting, and I think sometimes we look at this. I look at this incongruency of our lives as a real predictor of results. And so, I hear two different stories of law school. One is drinking and taking and smoking and avoiding, and one is just. There wasn't any congruency. You were really leveling to this back down to this thermostat that had been set during your youth, which was, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to achieve,
right,
I'm not going to succeed. And so, because you demonstrated before with the right behaviors, the right kids, the right schooling, that you could do well.
Right.
And here, for whatever reason, you'd started to, have this belief that I wanted to be in law school, but the behaviors were still unhealthy. And the way that you were pursuing law school, let's just say weren't necessarily consistent with the behaviors that people that want to achieve in law school really engage in. And so you really still were at these crossroads of these two battling,
Well, I was avoiding.
Yeah.
You said the word. It was just a pure avoidance. I went to law school at night. It was 4 years, and it was 4 years of just, I was just putting off the inevitable, where I could just kind of like get away with partying and doing my thing. And, it was all potential. The potential of getting a license to practice law and being able to represent some of my friends in the community who needed a lawyer and would tell me, when you pass the bar, you're going to be my lawyer. And they knew I was smart, and they knew that I was quick on my feet, and they knew that I probably would have been a really good lawyer. But I was avoiding. I wasn't. Like you said, I was incongruent, but I didn't know any of this.
No, of course.
I was trying to convince myself that I was going to be this hot lawyer, and of course, deep down, I knew that I was crashing and burning the whole way because I wasn't doing anything.
And so, you took the bar, loaded.
I tried to take the bar sober, and I couldn't really function. I went back that after the morning. The bar is so long that they give you 3 hours in the morning, and then you have to go back in the afternoon for 3 hours in the afternoon. And that's 3 days of that, 3 and 3, 3 and 3, 3 and 3. So I went to the bar, and I was like, I'm gonna be straight for this. And I probably hadn't been straight in years. And I go in there, and I'm just so kind of foggy, and I can't function. And I went back to my hotel room that afternoon. They gave us like 2 hours for lunch. I went back to my hotel room, and I got stoned. And I went back and I took the afternoon portion of the bar exam stoned, and probably did better because I was back to like a state of normal instead of just being completely out of the normal balance that my body was used to.
Yeah, and so no surprise that the law pursuit, fell flat, and the bar wasn't passed, and we're studying loaded, and we're taking tests loaded, and we're wondering why we're not achieving.
Right.
And that's the great lies that we always say. The most important lie is the one we tell ourselves, and that's kind of the way you were living it. And there's some great contrasts that we're going to get into because we know kind of where things turned around for you. So where did your bottom come from? Where did your bottom come? That was it.
That was it. Well, it was I was 29, and a lot of my friends were starting to move up the ladder, and I could see that I wasn't making it. I was, no matter how much I tried to kid myself and tell myself that, I'm going to do this, and it's that destination disease. I'm going to be happy when I get into law school. I'm going to be happy when I graduate from college. I'm going to be happy when I pass the bar. I'm going to be happy when, I get this or get that. And none of it was working out. So I go to take the bar, and I didn't pass. And a lot of people were shocked that I didn't pass the bar. A lot of people, when you get your bar results and you talk to the people that you went to law school, there's always going to be this, did you hear who passed? And no, I can't believe that person passed. And then did you hear who didn't? And I was one of those where it was like, oh, he didn't pass. And I just felt like I was just a giant disappointment. I went back and took the bar 6 months later, knowing that, it was no different. I just continued to just get loaded. I went in, took the bar loaded. It was really no big surprise when I didn't pass. And that was my bottom, because then it was like, well, I've got a law degree. That's got to be worth something, right? Well, no, it's really not. If you have a license to practice law, that's worth something. But if you go into a law office, or if you try to get a legal job with a law degree, then you're basically just a legal assistant or a paralegal. And they're going to ask you, the first thing they're going to ask you is, how fast can you type? You know? And I was like, with no mistakes, I could probably type like maybe 10 or 15 words a minute.
Right. That was not a skill you developed.
I could probably text faster than I can type.
And so what was the impetus for change? What was the impetus to say, I just can't keep living like this and continuing to have these experiences?
You know, I didn't know. It was like I couldn't succeed and I couldn't fail. I was just in this neutral no man's land. I could always just kind of put a suit on and go get a job selling something or doing something, but I was so profoundly unhappy, and I knew that emotionally, I knew I was sinking down. And I would journal, and I was praying that God would kill me. You know, I would just say, God, just kill me. I suck. I failed. Just take me out, man. I can't do this. I don't know what's wrong with me. I know I've been given a lot of gifts. I know I have. And I know that people like having me on their team. They like having me on their sports teams. They like having me on their business teams. They like having me just to hang out. But for some reason, I can't make it in this world. I just don't know how to do that. And then I got a call. I was going to hike out into the Santa Monica Mountains and just live off the land. I thought I'd be alone out there. It turns out that there's like homeless people living out there, which that would have freaked me out. I don't know what I would have done. I would have run away from that. I don't know what I would have done. But then I got a call.
Heaven forbid you be isolated amongst a bunch of other people.
Yeah, right. So then I got a call. My sister, the one that I had all the problems with growing up, actually gave my number, and cell phones had just come out. This was in September of 2000. And I had just gotten a cell phone. No one had that number. And the phone rang. And I'm looking at that phone, because I had a landline, and that phone didn't ring either. But if anybody wanted to call me, that was the number to call. And I look at that cell phone, and the cell phone's ringing. I'm like, that's weird. No one has this number. And I pick up the phone, and this voice comes over the phone that says, "Hi, Mike, this is Andrew, and your sister gave me your number, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my story." And I knew what he wanted to talk about, and I almost hung up. I mean, it was a flip phone, and I had the flip ready to just close. But I didn't. I listened to him, and I got a little intrigued, and then he said something that I thought only I'd ever felt, and then he said another thing, and he started to tell my story, and I didn't know anybody else felt that way. And he offered to take me to dinner and take me to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, the dinner sounded pretty good, so I figured, I'll do the dinner thing. If I got to do the meeting thing to get the dinner, that sounds good. And it wasn't like I was starving or didn't have anything to eat or anything like that, but I just didn't know how to eat, and I wasn't feeding myself properly. So I was probably really poorly nourished, didn't feel good from a nutrition standpoint, and getting a nice Italian dinner sounded pretty good, So he got me with that.
Wow. The hook was set.
Yeah.
Dinner and a meeting. And since that day, and you started on a journey.
Yeah.
and found recovery and now have celebrated how long, Mike?
20 years.
Yeah, 20 years of continuous sobriety as a result of changing
Yeah.
your behaviors. And I think one of the things that's interesting, because now we're going to fast forward, and you find this purpose in trying to help other people.
Yeah.
And so you decide to venture back into the academic world, but this time not to be a lawyer, but to become a certified drug and alcohol counselor.
Yes.
And there's lots of paths to become a certified drug and alcohol counselor.
Yes.
And so I take this failing law student, this academic probation law student with these really deep-seated insecurities and records of not good enough that have been playing in your head, fueled by drugs and alcohol. And I think we know that more than most people, alcoholics and addicts, do lead these double lives, right? So that's why I don't think it's not surprising to me, and it's not surprising to you why you didn't pass the bar, but it's surprising to so many others because you portrayed to the outside world this good student, this
Right.
guy that had these academic gifts. You'd proved them before, and everyone just assumed that you were applying those in law school, but they didn't know that you were numbing and avoiding and drinking and smoking to deal with the insecurities that you had. And so you portrayed these two different characters, one inside rotten and unworthy,
Exactly.
one on the outside that you couldn't live up to.
Two different people.
And so in sobriety now, you've found a different way to live, and so you go back to this academic path, this gift that you had, and you pursue this certification to become a certified drug and alcohol counselor, and you don't do this online. You don't go to a third tier community college. You decide to apply to UCLA.
Yes, I did.
And I want to understand that journey, because it's very different and in a lot of contrast, because I don't think they use coloring books to become a certified drug and alcohol counselor. I know there's a lot of pharmacology. There's a lot of science. There's a lot of theory.
Biology.
And so how did this new version of Mike do academically? Were you on academic probation at UCLA?
No. I went in there with not any intent to be great or to do anything above average. I went in there with the intent that I was going to educate myself the best way I could, to be the best counselor that I could, and to just learn what I could. And I was scoring like perfect, getting like perfect scores on the tests. And I think that it was just something that I have a passion for, something I put my heart in. And anything that I've ever really had a heart for, I've always done well. If I have a passion for it, and if I truly feel it in my gut that this is what I want to do, then yes, I will do it. I'll get it done.
Yeah, and I think that is so important. And I think that contrast to me, because you didn't get a brain transplant, you didn't get a bunch of tutors, you didn't change your parents, you didn't change your sisters and brothers. All of these things in your life, the external circumstances were exactly the same.
Exactly.
You were the embodiment of the same Mike Conroy, failing in law school, on academic probation, failing the bar. Find congruency, level up your beliefs, level up your behaviors, find something that you're passionate about and a new purpose, and you're able to execute flawlessly at one of the top schools. You could argue UCLA, one of the top certified drug and alcohol counselor programs.
They think they are.
Yeah.
They'll tell you that.
Yeah.
They told us that a lot.
Yeah. And
they are.
And they are.
Yeah.
They have a rigorous academic schedule. They have incredible professors.
Yeah.
And their standards are high.
Yeah.
And you were able to succeed and excel when you shifted your perception of yourself and your purpose in life.
Well, that's a really good point, because before, every other academic pursuit I'd ever had in my life was really for me. It was and I didn't know that, but it was really, I was doing it because I wanted to feel good. I wanted to feel relief, just like a drug.
Yeah.
But when I went to KDAC school, I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for the people that I knew I was going to come in contact with. I was doing it for God. I was doing it because I knew God was going to put people in front of me, like he always has. And I was going to be the best person that I could be when God puts somebody in front of me that he wants me to help.
And I want to get to kind of this last leg of the journey for you, because you spent a lot of time, even with your certification, trying to find your way and still, leveling back down to these beliefs. I mean, I want to really be clear about these thermostats, and it's important where we put them, because despite now having this academic success and being a certified drug and alcohol counselor, certified by, UCLA as a student, and having your certification to put on the wall, there was still this bit of unworthiness that you hadn't dealt with. And so, you started to take lower positions. You started to become unsatisfied even with what you were able to do there, and got into window washing and some other things, because it was almost like going back out to the Santa Monica Mountains for you. It's like, I know I can wash windows, I know I can, but you had these experiences with washing windows where people were coming to you, naturally for help, and so there was no avoiding this gift that you had, and as much as you were trying to just wash windows and make a living, that there was a calling that you couldn't avoid.
Yeah, I mean, people would follow me around their house like they were kind of like watching me, like making sure that I'm doing my job, but really I was counseling them. And there were times when I would get so lost in the connection that I was forming with these individuals that I would I just stopped washing windows and didn't realize it. So a job that should have taken me maybe 2 hours would take me like 4. And a job that should have taken maybe 3 or 4 would take all day. And I was okay with that. I just felt like, I don't really care. I don't care about the money. I don't care about the career, the direction, or anything like that. God put this person in front of me. This person is reaching out. This person needs help, and I can help them, and I'm going to help them. That's it.
And it's been amazing. And it's been amazing to watch you grow because, watching you take on this role of director of recovery services and deal with the high level clients that we have,
Yes.
that come into the executive recovery program at Archway House has really challenged you. And, talk a little bit about the growth, even with 20 years of sobriety and all of your counseling, the growth that you've gone through over the last couple of years,
Well,
Mike.
it's such a lesson for me because, I still have that destination disease. I mean, I'm not beyond anybody else in the world. I'm just walking a path, and there's a bunch of people walking this path with me. And the challenges come, you get to 20 years, and when I got sober, 20 years was impossible. 90 days was impossible. And then I find myself taking a 20-year cake one day. And I just think like, oh my God, how did that happen? Did I miscount? Did I only have 19? Am I really 20 years sober? And there's always that, I don't know, that complacency that sneaks in there in the back. No matter what you do, I've always tried to remain vigilant and not rest on my laurels. But there's that thought just creeps its way in there that, at 20 years, I should be better. I should be ahead of where I am. I should have more. I should be doing more. I should be more accomplished. But there's always a learning curve. There's always a struggle. Life always moves up and down and it ebbs and flows. It's never linear. And so, yes, the 20 years is linear, but my learning curve, while there's some things I've done really well, there's other things that I still needed to, get humble. And so I got humbled and I learned, and I had to step way back and take a look at the big picture and try something new. And you, Charlie, have been a huge, huge help to me in that. You've really helped me with a lot of just love and knowledge and wisdom and willingness to, look at me for who I am and say, why don't you try this? And I had the willingness and the humility to try that. And so a lot of the things that I've learned in this job have been because of coming to you and saying like, I don't know what to do with this guy. He won't do what I tell him to do. Like I did what they told me to do, and I'm telling him to do it and he won't do it. And why won't he do it?
Yeah.
I was frustrated.
Of course. Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, I'd say, leadership is really not a title. Leadership is a skill. It's a skill of
It is a skill.
skill of influence.
It's a skill.
And learning that. And one of the things I don't want to leave without asking you, and I think it's important. So many people do suffer in silence. So many people do have these limiting beliefs. So many people have had other people writing in the pages of their life, and they've been reading those stories and listening to them and believing them. And as somebody who's walked through so much in the course of your life, if there's somebody who's listening, who's got, maybe they're in recovery and still feeling this way. Maybe they haven't found recovery and they're feeling this way. What's the advice that Mike Conroy would give to somebody who's struggling about what they can do to start moving from where they are to where they want to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, I remember feeling like a newcomer and feeling like there's no hope for me. And there have been times, not a lot of times, but there have been moments having 20 years and feeling like, this is hopeless. I've hit a brick wall and I don't know what to do. I feel like a newcomer again. And I would say you got to ask for help. You got to take a chance. You got to have a faith. Take a leap of faith. Don't give up. Talk to somebody. A lot of people that I've talked to were just random people that I just ran into. One of the commitments I've made to myself and to God is that when I'm just out at the, hardware store, grocery store, or whatever I'm doing, I'm going to remain open because I used to be kind of closed off because I just, I'm so sensitive. I just didn't talk to people. And now I strike up conversations with people. If somebody strikes up a conversation with me, I open up and I look them in the eye and I see where they're going and I walk with them and I talk with them because anybody that you reach out to could be that person that just gives you that little glimmer of hope that can get you through the day, that can get you to the thing, that'll get you to the bridge where you can cross that gap and you can get to a place where you can make it.
Yeah.
So don't ever give up.
Don't ever give up. It's amazing. And it's been a remarkable privilege to share and the journey with you, and to have you come on, and thank you for overcoming Out Loud. It gives so many people hope, because you've got such a powerful story. You've changed so much. And Mike is, as I said, he's the director of recovery services at Archway House. He runs Solid Ground Recovery. He's got a practice where he spends a lot of time helping people find the support and accountability that they need. And he's a dear friend of mine and of our teams. And, thanks so much for being on today, bro.
Oh, it was such an honor. Thank you so much, Charlie. I love you, man.
Love you too.
All right, buddy.